All right, that'll do it for today. To submit questions for us to discuss, items for the Dragon's Hoard, or stories for the Funeral Pyre, please email us at interpartyconflict@gmail.com. For show notes, links to media mentioned on the show, and running lists of questions and magic items, go to interpartyconflict.com. Join the discussion on social media. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/interpartyconflict, on Reddit at r/interpartyconflict, on our Interparty Discord, or on Twitter at InPartyConflict for our weekly social media questions. Your answers might end up on the show. Find us on the podcatcher of your choice. We're on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, YouTube, anywhere you get podcasts. Please rate, review, subscribe, or just tell a friend. We love word of mouth. It's one of the best forms of advertising we can get. And if you'd like to support the show monetarily, check out the rewards at patreon.com/interpartyconflict. We have a few different tiers, so anything you can spare, even $1 a month, would go towards making the show better, and you'll get bonus content for it. Jeff, tell us about FriendQuest.
FriendQuest is a YouTube channel where we play video games, but due to some technical difficulties and the quarantine and stuff, it's we've been unable to put the last couple episodes up, so we will.
Gotcha.
We'll have to see how it goes. I'm working on a workaround as far as the technical issue.
Okay.
Just some weird audio issues. It's hard because we have to record remotely. Things are a little bit more complicated, but
sure,
we'll figure it out.
Okay. Speaking of video games, check out my side project, the Arcade Memories podcast. I mentioned earlier that I actually just put out what is possibly going to be the last episode of that. Mm-hmm. So, if I get enough submissions, maybe someday I'll make more episodes. But for the time being, this is it. If you would like to submit anything for a future episode or just to share a story with me, you can submit that to arcadememoriespodcast@gmail.com. Also, head over to bit.ly/interpartyconflict to take a short survey about our show, what you like, what you don't like, etc. And just for taking it, you'll get two printable board games courtesy of Mary and Tom over at hollandspiel.com. And our music is made by Boxcat Games from Nameless the Hacker's RPG. So, Jeff, until next time.
I'm so confused.
Well, don't worry, Jeff. Your feelings are your feelings. Our Funeral Pyre story was submitted by Peastroy Pancakes via Discord. And she says, so I would like to start off with a bit of a disclaimer. This is about Pendragon RPG, in which you play heroic knights in the Arthurian legend, fighting Saxons and fable creatures like griffins and giants.
Cool.
So we decided to add another supernatural element, female knights. Just in case there are Pendragon rules lawyers here, we also call those ladies and not sirs. Mm-hmm. Hear the story of the demise of Lady Gwendolen of Woodford, one of a group of knights known throughout Salisbury for their beauty and virtue. The year began tumultuous as Lady Gwendolen, Sir Harris, and Lady Arwen took it upon themselves to rescue Lady Arwen's brother, who had been kidnapped by a rival knight. In a heroic, almost suicide mission, Lady Gwendolen and Lady Arwen snuck into the house of said knight and rescued Sir Roland, while Sir Harris rallied their fellow knights and attacked the front gate. It was a major success, especially because Lady Gwendolen was able to pull off this daring feat even though she was much more skilled at slaying foes with lance or spear from atop her horse. After such heroics and witnessing the Duke of Cornwall submit to their king Uther Pendragon, in high spirits her friends convinced Lady Gwendolen to accompany them for what was supposed to be a short hunting trip, while on their way to defeat some more Saxons. During this, they stumbled upon the tracks of a small giant. In the past, Lady Gwendolen had fought and almost lost her life to a giant, but her apprehension was surpassed by her trust in her friends and the knowledge that no one could stand in their way, so she once again gave in and the group pursued the giant. Sadly, they were not able to cleanse the evil off the land in slaying the giant. Lady Gwendolen was hit by the swing of the giant's club, so strong she was flung off her horse and unconscious before she even hit the ground. Similarly, Lady Arwen was crushed, and Sir Harris and their squires had no other choice but to speed off with the mortally wounded Lady Gwendolen and leave behind Lady Arwen's broken form. Lady Gwendolen could not be resuscitated and succumbed to her wounds later in the camp, but gained substantial glory for her heroic fight against the giant.
Woof.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a heroic story. kind of an ignoble end, I guess. So let's raise a glass in memory of Lady Gwendolyn, who faced her fears, but unfortunately met the same end as everybody. Clink. All right. Well, I guess that'll do it for our questions. So let's wind down a little bit. Let's relax. Let's take a deep breath.
Oh, mine always turn into yawns.
Let's remember those who are working hard to keep the world running for us right now while we're in this difficult situation. Let's honor their memory as we toss another log onto the funeral pyre. All right, so that was our last social media question. Next up is the next social media question. The question is, you're stuck in quarantine with your last D&D character. How do you fare over the next 3 weeks? More of an abstract question, but,
I was going to say it might be pretty cool because I was thinking of my last character, my Warforged, but actually the last character I ever played was my turtle.
Yes.
And the turtle I made is a druid of the Circle of Spores, so it would probably be a little problematic.
What's his name? Patient Zero?
Sure. Yeah. It's gonna at the very least it'll be very musty. It's not gonna smell great.
Sure.
But if those mushrooms if some of those mushrooms are edible, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? I think the last character that I played was in Justin's game, that game that Justin streamed that you and I were in.
Oh, right, yeah.
In which case my character was Bariah, who was he's all about traveling. Like his whole shtick is he worships like the god of the journey. And so I think he would get a little bit stir crazy.
Yeah.
And I would probably get a little stir crazy in response.
Right,
so
yeah.
Probably not too well.
Yeah, somebody who loves traveling, who worships traveling, getting stuck in one place. Yeah. That doesn't sound great.
Yeah. All right. So I'm interested in hearing what some of our listeners have to say. I think could be an interesting question. Maybe we'll get some stories in there. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I think that'll do it for our regular questions for today, but we do still have our social media questions. And our last social media question was, have you ever hurt yourself playing a tabletop RPG? And I guess I didn't make this clear. I think it was clear enough, but I could have made it clearer. I'm talking about like physical injuries at the gaming table or so on.
Sure.
So do you have any examples?
Nothing specific I can think of. Mm-hmm. Maybe. Well, I know like I had already had a back injury, but then I remember like bending over a table while we were playing cards one time or something, and it sprained my back even more. I was like, oh, that was dumb. Like I've definitely re-injured myself playing games, but injuring myself, I don't know, maybe bumping my head on a table to like pick up a dice that rolled off of it or something.
Yeah. I don't really have any good examples. I think I might have stepped on a D4 at some point.
Oof.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't expect a ton of responses from our listeners, but we definitely did not get a ton of responses from our listeners. We didn't get any on Facebook, which is surprising, but hey, I kind of expected it. Over on Reddit, Alistar the Minotaur says, does laughing so hard I pulled a muscle count? How about face palming so hard I get a headache? If not, then no. I would say both of those count.
Yeah, that counts.
Yeah. Javokler says, have you ever stepped on a D4 with your shoes off? It makes Legos feel like a cloud of pillows. But to answer your question more clearly, yes. Yes, I have.
Yeah, it's just a slightly less spiky caltrop.
Yeah. We didn't get any on Twitter, and we got just a couple on Discord. Jeff T says, physically, no. Socially, yes. Skipped out on a lot of other stuff to play D&D.
Oh, okay.
I definitely feel that.
I understand that, yep.
I could have been athletic. No, I could not.
I'm not going to kid myself, no.
And then Jason E says, does hitting your head because the ceiling in the DM's basement is so low count as hurting yourself playing D&D? Yes. Yes, it does.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. The hitting the ducting in the basement.
Yep. In Jay's basement.
Yep.
Dustin says 2 words, D4 caltrops.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Peace-Joy Pancake says, physically, not that I remember. Socially, no, this is my one way to regularly socialize. Emotionally, yes, I legit shed tears when one of my characters died.
Aw.
Yeah.
Yeah, that counts, though.
That counts.
Yeah.
And then finally, Jom Gemstone says, physically, yes, we were playing outside on a warm summer evening, and I slipped and fell off the porch, breaking the banister.
Oh.
Socially, of course, my first DM constantly caused issues until finally many of us got into an argument. I feel you there.
Yeah, Gabe and I get upset at each other all the time. You could, you know from our many episodes where we're yelling at each other.
Yes, I mean, heck, we have a podcast named after it, for crying out loud.
Right. Yep. All this conflict.
Yep.
All right. Our last question is from Round to Go on Reddit, and they ask, "Am I a jerk for being upset that my boyfriend flirted with an NPC?"
Right. And I want to put a little disclaimer here. The Reddit post that this was from did not include any details. Maybe there were some down in the comments, but there were no details for what happened in the situation. So I don't know anything about the specifics. We're not necessarily going to be talking about Round 2 Go specifically. Just I'm sure this is a situation that lots of people have encountered.
Right.
You're at a game with your significant other, and then at some point your significant other starts flirting with a non-player character in the game. Does it make you a jerk to be a little bit upset or a little bit uncomfortable at that?
I mean, short answer, no. You're not a jerk for feeling that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, however you like act on it might go one way or another. But it can be kind of. I can understand there being like some jealousy in like these role playing sort of situations. Like it's not unnatural. It's not like you're not being a bad person for feeling that way.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like what I said with the last question. You can't help how you feel. You know,
right.
Feelings are not really something you choose. How you act on them is, but if you feel that way, you feel that way. So you're not a jerk for that. Maybe, again, like you said, maybe how you act on it, you might be a jerk for that. But just having the feelings isn't, that in and of itself, that's not something you should feel bad about.
Right, yeah. It's like, like we said, you can feel embarrassed or you can feel uncomfortable, but, you can, in the moment, you can say, hey, that makes me uncomfortable, but don't go out of your way to be like, hey, you should never do that ever.
Yeah.
But it's tricky, and it's something you want to communicate with your significant other for sure.
Sure.
Obviously you want to do that in private.
Yeah.
But definitely don't bring it up in an accusatory way, unless, I guess, everybody knows their significant other better than we do, obviously.
Right. Oh, well, I'm going to watch you, Jeff.
If this is like a thing that happens all the time, like if they're very flirty with everybody and, it's just, that could just be a thing that's been like, going on for a long time. And this could just be sort of like the last straw of like, okay, come on, guy.
Sure.
But for the most part, if you're going to bring it up, don't bring it up in an accusatory way. Be like, hey, so this sort of thing makes me a little uncomfortable. Can we talk about it?
Yeah. Now, here's a thing to keep in mind in this situation that maybe you thought about it, maybe you didn't. Maybe this is actually the underlying issue that you are trying to avoid when asking the question. And again, not specific to Round 2 Go. I don't know anything about Round 2 Go's situation. This is just to anyone who might be asking this question to themselves. Are you, okay, just try to remember that the NPCs are not real characters. Mm-hmm. They are, in pretty much every case, going to be the dungeon master. Whoever is sitting in the dungeon master's chair, that is actually who your significant other is talking to. So
right.
It might be that you are concerned that your significant other is actually flirting with the person that is the dungeon master. Sure. Maybe not. But if the dungeon master is a person that your significant other might be attracted to, and if that is actually what your concern is, then that is a different issue. That is something that you need to talk to your significant other about. Again, you're not necessarily a jerk, but that is a relationship issue that is separate from the game entirely. That is something that you need to deal with them. Now, as far as being upset that your boyfriend flirted with an NPC, here's something that this makes me think of that I think is kind of funny. So my wife, on many occasions, has gotten mad at me because of something I did in a dream that she had. She got mad at me because of the dream version of me that exists entirely in her mind. She got upset at me for something that dream version of me did. She just opened the door and she is glaring at me right now. Come here.
Oh gosh.
Come
Hi,
here.
Lisa.
These are legitimate feelings.
You heard her, folks.
Yeah.
I can't back this up any further because I know it's ridiculous.
But my point, get on the mic.
Okay.
My point, what I was just saying is that you can't help how you feel. Your feelings are real. It's how you act on those feelings that may or may not be a problem. You're not a jerk for being upset that this thing happened. However, getting mad at me and taking that anger out on me, that's when it becomes a problem.
No, it's not.
Okay.
I rest my case.
Okay.
All right. You don't have to stay in here anymore.
I'm going to go hang out with my boyfriend.
Okay.
The four-legged one?
Yes, the four-legged one. So.
Gabe.
Yes.
What if round to go is the DM?
Oh, dang.
Like, doesn't that make it a little bit more interesting?
I mean, it makes it a little different, but at the same time, no, because that's the NPC is part of you.
Right, exactly. So like she's, like the round to go could be, instigating the flirting, and then because the significant other flirted back, now it's like an entrapment sort of thing. Like, gotcha.
I don't know. Again, I don't know round to go's situation, but
right. I think that borders on jerk. Like,
I suppose so. There might be some specifics even in that case, but
right, exactly. That's not definitely okay. You're a jerk if you do that, but
yeah.
But that's treading the line there.
Right. But so again, going with the last question, if this is something that you are feeling while you're at the table, again, your feelings are not the problem. So you don't necessarily want to let it keep going without addressing it. So, again, maybe not like, again, going with our first question, actually, not necessarily at the table, immediately stop the game and be like, you need to stop doing this. But maybe next time the group takes a break, pull them aside and be like, hey, look, I know that this sounds really stupid. I know that this sounds petty. I feel really dumb saying this, but it makes me a little uncomfortable when you flirt with the NPCs. Can you try to tone it down a little bit?
Right.
They're your significant other. Yeah. Again, they're probably good people. So hopefully they will understand. If they don't understand, I mean, that's indicative of something else. Just stress that that this is ridiculous. You feel ridiculous saying it, but you can't help feeling this way. Can you just tone it down a little bit?
Yeah. Because that can solve a couple things. Because that can, like, saying it out loud might make you think like, okay, this is sort of silly. Because like jealousy is very reactive. Like you're not always doing it on purpose. It just sort of happens. Like, oh, that's something I want.
Yeah.
So like saying it out loud, like, oh, I'm upset because you flirted with this NPC. Oh, okay, I see this now. All right, yeah, like it's still valid. It's still a valid feeling, but saying it out loud can explain it to yourself that like, okay, this is not as big of a deal as I originally thought, maybe. And then it might also get the significant other to be maybe tone it down, like you said, like, maybe they were getting really into it with like as like actual role play and stuff, but like they can still have their character flirt with an NPC, but maybe move that slider more towards mechanics versus, actual, like role playing.
Sure. Instead of describing all of the flirting, maybe roll some dice.
Right, exactly. It's like I'm going to try to woo her and then roll your dice to see, rather than like actually, putting the moves on the DM role play style.
Yeah. I guess one quick question. Do you think that the person in this case should talk to the dungeon master? And I mean, assuming they have talked to their significant other first, should they also mention it to the dungeon master separately? Hey, just so you know, I was getting kind of weirded out when my significant other was flirting with this NPC. I've already talked to them. Could you maybe tone down the flirting back a little bit? Or, like you were saying, Jeff, make it a little bit more mechanical rather than role-playing.
I would say, I would definitely not want to say that, do that for sure. Like, that is going to be a definite case-by-case thing. Like, if you feel like it's necessary, do it. But, like, it's, in most cases, this is going to be between you and your significant other.
Sure, that's a good point.
If the DM is sort of, maybe the DM thought it was entertaining the first time it happened and keeps pushing in more situations like that on that same person.
Sure. You
could then be like, hey, you mind toning back on that a little bit? It makes us a little uncomfortable,
Sure.
So that's not something I would definitely say like, oh yeah, definitely talk to the DM about this, but I'm sure the DM might pick up on it once the person starts toning down their end of it.
Sure. That's a good point. Then, yeah, in that case, I would say, unless you really feel it is necessary, don't bring anybody else into it. Right. Just talk to your significant other. So.
Yep. But yeah, the answer to the question, not a jerk. Feelings are feelings.
Yes.
It's just how you act on them.
Cool. And yeah, hopefully we've given some helpful advice for that, for anybody who might be going through something like that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Our next question comes from Jeff T on Discord, and they ask, a game run by a new DM at my local game store quickly became inappropriate for young audiences. What is the best way to address this without alienating good people?
Yeah, so this is probably a situation that happens I imagine, more often than you'd think. It's just sometimes it's an issue, sometimes it's not. So you're playing a game at the local gaming store, and maybe you're there with your kids, or, there are some younger audiences at the table. Maybe they're not even at the table. There's just some younger people around the store, depending on how your gaming store is set up. They're just nearby, maybe looking at board games or whatever.
Yeah, there's several tables. Like there could be a few kids playing like Yu-Gi-Oh or something at one table, and then this group is making a loud ruckus over at the other table,
Yeah. And as much as you would hope that people playing in a public space would remember that, hey, try to keep this appropriate for whatever people might be nearby, doesn't always happen. Sometimes the dungeon master is going to, go off with some blue comedy or whatever, or maybe one of the players or something. If somebody at the table is starting to make, some off-color jokes or whatever, how do you address that without, again, being accusatory? You don't necessarily want to say, you are making a mistake, you need to fix this. Like with the last question, it might just be, maybe they just made a mistake. So how can you address that while giving them the benefit of the doubt in order to keep it from becoming a bigger problem? You don't want to alienate somebody who just made a mistake.
Sure. I mean, really, it could be just as simple as oh, hey, there's kids around, like you just kind of bring it up like real quick, just like, oh, don't make a big deal out of it. Just sort of say like, oh, hey, maybe we should tone that down a bit because, there's, a few kids in the store right now.
Sure.
So, I mean, because that's one of those things that it's sort of like, there's probably going to be a few people who are going to be like, what? Who cares? I don't care. I could say whatever I want. But in this question, they're saying without alienating good people. I'm assuming the DM is a good person. So would at least have the sense of going like, oh, you're right. Sorry. I'll tone that down.
Right.
These are other people's kids. It's not up to you to expose them to more mature, topics. That's,
sure.
That's not exactly easily avoidable, but at the very least, you can do your part to help them avoid that. They don't need that right now, you know?
Sure. I think that the best thing you can do is to address it immediately when it happens.
Yeah.
If somebody, makes some sort of a dirty joke or whatever, the more time that passes before you say something about it, the harder it's going to be to go back and correct it. If somebody, they say like, oh yeah, my character whips out their weapon and, it looks like a sex toy or something like that.
Sure.
If you say, well, hang on a second, there are kids here, you should probably tone that down a little bit, then they can be like, oh, and then maybe call it something else make up a term for it that everybody at the table will understand, but nobody that was not at the table at the time will understand.
Yeah, maybe go for like more clever innuendos or something.
Sure.
You can kind of stretch it a little bit, to a point, but at the same time, like you got to be real careful with that.
Sure. But like, so what I'm saying is that if you don't say anything about it now and you wait until the end of the session, number one, you can't go back and change the past. People who were present in the time that you weren't saying anything,
right?
Will, if they were offended by it, are still going to have been offended by it.
Yeah, the damage is done. Like, the parents may have already gone to the store to say that, so and so said such and such, and now you're going to get kicked out of the store or something silly.
And you actually bring us to a good point. When this was asked on the Discord, another one of our listeners pointed out that it's important to differentiate between, oh, this kind of talk makes me uncomfortable, or let's say you are the proprietor of the store and somebody comes up and complains to you that they heard somebody making all of these dirty jokes in the next room over. That could impact your business. Like if you are the owner of the store or somebody that knows the owner of the store or whatever, there's a difference between just it makes me uncomfortable and I cannot condone this because this is my business and I can't make it seem like this is okay.
Right.
So if you have any sort of stake in the actual business of the business, then that is definitely something you should immediately stop it and say, hang on a second, this is a family friendly establishment. Can we change that? Like that is a much more urgent thing to get across because you cannot make it seem like this is okay. There was one time I was at our local gaming store here, Pandemonium, and it's not this exact situation, but I was in line. There was one guy in front of me and he was friends with the guy that was behind the counter. And he was talking while the guy at the counter was ringing something up. The other guy was talking with him and he used a dirty term. I'm not going to say it, but he said it. And the guy behind the counter immediately was like, whoa, guy, I can't, there's customers here. I can't be talking to you like that. And I immediately had a lot of respect for this person because if he hadn't said that, I probably wouldn't have given it a second thought, but he was on the job. He understood, I know that I'm talking with a friend of mine, but I need to keep this professional for now. And I really respected that. Mm-hmm. If they are not a good person, they might not respect that, but I think good people are going to respect that. Even if they were the one that made the comment, they'll realize, oh shoot, I was getting a little too comfortable. Sorry about that.
Right. Yeah. It's, it's a quick, as long as you're like immediate and quick about it and don't make like a huge deal out about it. I think most good people are going to be like, oh shoot, sorry. And then continue on the conversation. You know, it's, it shouldn't be a big deal to just be like, oh, hey, don't, you don't tone that language down, no,
sure.
No big deal. 'Cause here we are stopping it, but it could definitely be awkward. And I mean, like, I've a story that at the same place where I think me and a friend were playing Warhammer, and a few tables over there was a D&D session or something. It might have been D&D, but a couple of the players were getting very loud and rambunctious, and it was getting kind of racy, and I was like, that's kind of uncomfortable. I mean, I don't think there were very many people in the shop at the time, but I was just like, well, I mean, obviously it's not going to offend me, but it does make me uncomfortable that like things like that are being said out loud in a public place, in a place of business. So I mean, I'm like, I'm not going to stop them, but because, I'm like, I don't know them, it'll definitely be trickier if you're outside of the group, like, and you go, hey, don't say that.
Right. Yeah, that has less chance of being taken without any like upset feelings.
Right.
You know. Yeah. It's important to point out that like you don't have to justify being made uncomfortable by something like that. Like, I think that's pretty for anybody who is a good person. They're going to understand if you're made uncomfortable even a little bit, even if you're not a part of that group. You can't really help feeling what you feel. So you don't need to feel bad about like, I don't know, that made me kind of uncomfortable hearing, even though it doesn't offend you, it makes you uncomfortable hearing that in a public place and so on.
Right. Yeah. And like, I'm never going to like go out of my way to like say like people should never, ever, ever say those things. Like, no, have those fun, jokey times. If it's in private, go for it. Yes, it can be entertaining and hilarious. Like, dirty jokes are fun sometimes.
Yeah. It's all just a time and place thing. You know, there is a time and place for that. And unfortunately, that's not when you're in a public place playing D&D at the store.
Yeah. At the very least, in a shop that, sells like as many as mature games as it does like children's games. Like, sure, there are still grown people who play Yu-Gi-Oh! And I know I mentioned Yu-Gi-Oh! As an example as a kid's game. It's definitely marketed towards kids, but because it's an older game, there are definitely people who aren't kids anymore who still play it, and I don't judge them for that. But
sure.
But again, like there are games that are marketed towards kids sold in these shops, so that likely there will be a kid in there whose parents might not like that kind of language.
Yeah.
And if that parent gets upset about that, that kid might not be able to play that game anymore. And that's the worst possible outcome. That is the worst possible outcome. Like maybe that kid really wanted to get into D&D, but then the parent overheard a bunch of people playing D&D and heard them say these things. And it's like, no, I'm not going to let my kid play that. Like, I mean, that's not all the game is. And we know that. So like, don't let the parent be confused. This D&D could be as much as a family-friendly game as a more mature game.
Sure.
All right, our first question comes from Arcanist Winterbrand on email, and they ask, our DM never kills his players, even in situations where they rightfully should have died. Our party is at a point in the campaign where we feel there will be no consequence for our actions. Is there a good way to address this issue?
Yeah, so that's a tough situation because that's something that the DM might not realize they're doing it. And to bring it up in an accusatory way or in a way that like makes the dungeon master feel bad for what, the way they've been running the game could hurt some feelings. And I'm sure that is not the intention. But it's also a real thing. Like I've been in games where the dungeon master, it never felt like we were really in danger, and it did take a lot of the fun out of the game. So it's not something that you should just push aside and ignore. It is something that needs to be addressed, but how do you address it without, without upsetting someone's feelings and so on?
Right. Yeah, it's tricky because if you bring it up and the DM might might react in a way that like maybe it's like, okay, then I'll just kill your character.
Sure.
You might act out a little bit too much, and maybe try to deal out death a little bit more often.
Sure.
Like I feel like that can kind of backfire if you bring that up. You're like, well, I don't want my character to die, but I also don't want him to be in no danger because that's not fun. But if I bring it up, then maybe my character absolutely will die.
Sure.
I'd say maybe bring it up at the table because you might want to get everybody else's input on it, but you also don't want to put the DM on blast, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to depend on the group, but I would say not to bring it up at the table. If you need to talk to everybody else, if you need to get everybody else's input, talk to them privately ahead of time.
Sure, do one-on-one with each and be like, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah. I would say, like, if I was going to bring this up to a DM, I would probably bring it up once and try to be as casual as possible. Don't be like, look, you're doing something wrong. I would try to be like, hey, so something that I've noticed about the game is I've noticed that it rarely feels like we're in any danger, and bring up, if you can, have specific examples, because just saying something, just a general statement might not be as easily applicable. But if you say, do you remember that time where this happened and then I could tell that you fudged the bad guy's attack roll so he missed or whatever, bring that up as a specific example. Like, that made me feel like the fight wasn't dangerous and then it took a bit of the fun out of there. Try not to use like, you did this thing, but say, when this happened, this is the reaction I had. When this happened, I found it less fun than if my character had been knocked unconscious. Or, hey, I know that it would suck for my character to die, but at the same time, if my character died, then we can make a quest out of, reviving them, or I can make a new character that, does this other thing, and so on. Try to express to your dungeon master that it's not the biggest problem in the world if a character dies, or if a character is maimed, or a piece of equipment's destroyed, or whatever. Trying to make it seem like the consequences aren't that bad could be, or like the potential consequences wouldn't necessarily be such a bad thing. I think that might be a good way to start.
Right. A lot of times with questions, I'm always trying to come up with like new mechanics that will solve the situation, but adding new mechanics is always tricky. I'm just trying to think of like, maybe it's like for like random encounter style things, like it's like a lot less likely for somebody to die, like, because you don't want one of your players to die to like a goblin,
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I guess it could make for an interesting story depending on how it goes, but like there are some times where it's just like, oh, that's a dumb way to go. Like,
sure.
Like this was just like these were just the lookouts, and like he just happened to roll really good and get full damage or something.
Yeah.
But when you're facing like the boss of the dungeon or whatever, you could make it like, okay, though this is definitely where you can lose your life. I don't know if it's something you want to make known to the players where it's like, all right, I'm definitely not going to let them die here. Yeah. But once they get past this point, if something bad happens, I'm just going to let it happen. Just so like maybe it'll give them like a false sense of power, where it's like, okay, we're blowing through this with no problem. I thought maybe that goblin was gonna get me, but the DM said he rolled low, so I got through it fine. And so like he might be a little confident as he goes into like the boss fight or whatever.
Sure.
And then if he slips up, then you let him go, you let him drop to 0 or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just trying to figure out ways to like. At least some DMs don't want to kill their players' characters because like their players are attached to their characters.
Yeah, I've said in the past, like, I really don't like killing PCs, and I don't go far out of my way to stop it, but generally speaking, I try not to run a very deadly game, and I am always afraid that someone's fun is going to be ruined by that.
Right.
So like this is a concern of mine that like maybe my players feel like I'm never going to kill their characters. And so I don't know. I mean, I guess like with me, if the player made a dumb decision, I will let that, I would rather let that result in their character's death than just a random roll of the dice.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I feel like maybe sometimes it's the opposite. I don't know.
Because I feel like a player can make a mistake, but it's not necessarily because they like were doing something, risky or dumb. It was just sort of like, oops, I misthought of a way that I misunderstood a rule or something like that, where it wasn't necessarily their fault, but it was a mistake. It was it was something that the player did that got them killed.
I guess in thinking about it again, I think it might be that I'm fine with a player character dying when the player knows that it is a risk. Like if the player does something they know is really risky and that they know will probably get their character killed, I'm fine with that being the result. But if it's like, if they have no reason to think that this is going to be a deadly encounter, I don't want to be like, haha, LOL, this is a CR 4 levels above you. You shouldn't have gone into this room, you know.
It's really hard for a player to like measure that, because like there is that thing we've talked about before where like players don't run away in most cases. Like they just don't. Like they don't think, like it just that doesn't appear to them as an option in a lot of cases. They're just like, well, nope, I'm here. There has to be a way to defeat this because we're here.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of that like game design thing where it's like if you're put into a spot in the level, there has to be a way out of it. Like I'm in like a room and there's a puzzle. All the tools in which to solve the puzzle have to be right here.
Sure.
Whereas like, you know, more hardcore games or games like D&D, it's like that's not necessarily true. Like you could have stepped into the wrong room at the wrong time, and there is a monster that's several CRs higher than you.
Yeah.
And your only real choice is to escape. Like you just have to run. But because it's that sort of game sense of like, okay, no, I'm obviously here, so I have to fight this to keep going forward.
Right. So I guess the point that we're bringing all this up for this question is that like try to understand that it might not be intentional from the dungeon master. It might just be that they are trying to walk a fine line, and maybe the result, you know, maybe you're misreading the result. Probably not. You know, you probably know better than we do, but it's possible. It is possible that the dungeon master intends for it to be deadly, and then for whatever reason it just ends up not being deadly.
Right.
So again, try not to be accusatory. Try not to show up and be like, you are making a mistake. You need to change this. Instead say, when this thing happened, I had a little bit less fun than if this other thing had happened, and so on. And again, try to express to the dungeon master, it's not the end of the world if my character dies. Sometimes that happens. That means I get to make a new character and or have my current character brought back from the dead, and so on.
Yeah.
I had a character I've talked about before, my character Artemis Redsleeves. I had a pretty thought out story for where I wanted that character's life to go in this campaign, and then the character died unexpectedly. And that caused me to rethink everything that I had planned for that character, and I am so much happier with the result than if it had just been just what I had planned originally. I'm glad that my character died because it forced me to rethink the character.
Well, I mean, he got resurrected, right?
Yes, yeah. Sorry, he did get resurrected, but just, you know, try to express to your DM that like maybe that could happen with me. Maybe, you know, that might force me to choose a different trajectory with my character because dying is going to change someone, you know. So yeah, I would recommend talk to them separately, but you know your group better than me. If you know everybody else in the party is also having the same problem, maybe it'd be better to bring it up so everybody can discuss it as a group. I don't know. But if you do, you have to try extra hard not to sound like you're all dumping on the dungeon master. You know? Right.
Yeah, exactly. Because like you said, it might not be intentional. Like it just, you know, it's a tough thing to do, to balance a game where it feels challenging, but it's not like, oh, all right, we got to make our third character now.
Yeah. Yep, that's right. And before we go any further, we have a giveaway today. As usual, we're giving away a copy of Unearthed Tips and Tricks Volume 1, courtesy of Crit Academy. It is a great product that I helped write, and it contains some character concepts, some encounter concepts, some monster variants, some magic items, player tips, and DM tips, 25 of each from the Crit Academy podcast. It's a great product, and I'm actually currently working on on Volume 2. I'm getting pretty close to being done with my part, and then it'll be on Justin to get everything else taken care of. But so Volume 1 is a great product, and hopefully we'll get people interested in Volume 2. So in service of that, Jeff, who is our winner of Unearthed Tips and Tricks Volume 1 today?
Today's winner is Danny C.
Winner. Gobble, gobble, gobble. Yes, congratulations, Danny C. You should be getting that in your email in the next couple days. Be sure to leave Crit Academy a review. if you leave them a review on DM's Guild or Drive-Thru RPG or whatever, I'm sure that will help them to make better products in the future. Also, if you have any specific comments or criticisms, you can send those to me as well. Because, like I said, I am still working on the next one. So, if there's something that you really didn't like or really did like, I can try to include less or more of that in the part that I'm doing. So,
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you to Crit Academy for helping make this happen. It's really cool of them to give out free copies of this to our listeners every week. And thank you for Danny C for entering. Jeff, if anybody wanted to be like Danny C and they wanted to enter this drawing as well, how would they do so?
They can send us an email at interpartyconflict@gmail.com with unearthed tips and tricks in the subject line.
Yes, that's correct. And when you send us an email, you can put whatever you want in the body of the email. Danny C sent us a guacamole recipe.
Oh, nice.
I'm actually not a fan of guacamole myself.
Oh.
But if my wife ever wants guacamole, I can be like, hey, somebody sent me a recipe. Let's try it out.
I thought about grabbing some avocados when I was out grabbing food to, because we're going to be, eating in for a while. So
Sure.
And I was like, avocados, you kind of have to eat pretty much right away. Like they get ripe and then they go bad real quick.
Yeah, we actually had some from a few weeks ago, and they had gone completely bad by the time all this started. Anyway, so next up, I want to thank all of our wonderful patrons, and not just all of our patrons that have been patrons for a while, but we have a new patron this week.
Oh, sweet.
Yes, Kyle S. is a new patron. So a big, huge thank you to Kyle S. You are awesome. People like you keep the show going, and you make the world go round. So thank you so much. For anybody not familiar with Patreon, Patreon is an online platform where you can pledge to donate a certain amount of money to the creator of your choice every month. And if you pledge to us at patreon.com/interpartyconflict, we have a few different tiers, and each of the different tiers get you different rewards. On the lowest tier, we've got outtakes. I've written a bunch of fantasy fiction that I put out in the past. I'm also currently working on getting some of those fictions out as audio stories, like audio dramas, I guess. And I've actually been, during the quarantine, I've been recording some of those, and I'm hoping to get a bunch edited so that then I have them, periodically to release. So expect more of those in the future. Also, we have a monthly bonus podcast. This month's bonus episode has been a little delayed. Hopefully by the time, I'm sure by the time this episode goes out, this month's episode of the bonus episode has been out already. But hopefully that's understandable with everything that's been going on. Also on the top tier, we have a monthly Roll20 game. I've been running you guys through some Eberron adventures that I've been writing. And I imagine I'll probably try to get April's out pretty soon because, hey, it's not like I'm doing anything else. So I might as well be making some adventures.
Sure.
So yeah, we have some cool rewards on our Patreon. We also just added some new ones, some little things here and there. So if you want to help out the show and get some cool stuff in return, go to patreon.com/interpartyconflict. Check out the rewards and see if anything appeals to you, and help out the show and get some cool stuff.
Yeah. And I want to say a special thank you to everybody who is still contributing right now, because I know money might not be exactly, my money might be tight at, this point in time. It might get tight in the future. So, for anybody who is, still supporting us, we really appreciate it. And don't feel pressured to keep it up if you don't think you can, handle the expense.
Yes. Yeah. It's always understandable if you need to cancel your pledge for whatever reason. Right. Now, especially, it is understandable.
Yeah, exactly. So just don't feel guilty if you're like, what, I really need to be saving right now because who knows what the future may hold. That is completely understandable, but we do appreciate those who are supporting us.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, thank you to everybody. And then just one more thing, check out the other podcasts on the Crit Nation Fellowship, Crit Academy at critacademy.com. Crit Academy is a great podcast where Justin, Ian, and Brandon create new and reusable content for players and DMs alike. We've got Brute Force and Ignorance is an actual play podcast on the network with some great guys over in, most of them are over in Britain, I believe. And also check out D&D Character Lab. They're not making episodes anymore, but Garen and Dan made characters every week and pitted them against each other to debate whose characters were better. Enough with all the admin and such. Jeff, do you want to go ahead and jump into some questions?
Sure. That's on there for good, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Oh, jeez. I'm like rubbing my arm right now as if I got it.
Sure. So today's magic item was submitted by Dustin via Discord. Mm-hmm. And magic item is the Mark of the Marbled Moon.
Ooh.
So unlike a lot of the items that we get, this one is actually a tattoo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, magical tattoos are always pretty cool.
Yes, I am a big fan of magical tattoos. I think we had an episode where we talked about magical tattoos some time ago. Mm-hmm. The number is escaping me. Anyway, but it's not just any tattoo. This is a cursed tattoo.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so this cursed tattoo is the magnum opus of obsessed sculptor Varanus Terranoff. Years of imperfection in his sculptures drove him to the darkest of magics. If I can't make life from sculpture, I will just have to make sculpture from life. And sorry, I should say each of the sections of this magic item have a quote at the end, or have a quote at the end or the middle or something.
Oh, gotcha.
Once contracted, the tattoo appears as a twisted arcane rune on the bottom of the left foot. I will hide it on the base so it won't distract. The afflicted individual suffers no ill effects until they are touched by moonlight. At such time, they are transformed into a statue of the finest marble. All who gaze upon them must make a will save of 17 or be entranced for 10 minutes. During this trance, they are compelled to capture the likeness of the tattoo bearer any way they can. So, if you have this tattoo and you fail to save, it turns you into stone, and then other people have to look at you and they have to draw you or sculpt you or whatever. So it's not just a curse on you, it's a curse on everybody else.
Okay.
There is only one mark in existence, and it cannot be dispelled. It can only be transferred to a willing recipient by touch. True art must come from desire.
Huh. That's wild.
Yeah. So I kind of picture this less as a magic item that is, given to the PCs or whatever, and more of a plot hook.
Yeah.
There's maybe a statue in town that has been there for a very, very long time. And then one day there is a second statue somewhere, I don't know, somewhere nearby. And that second statue looks remarkably like a person that used to live nearby. And then it's because they saw this statue, they were entranced by it, they drew it or whatever, and then they found the tattoo on the foot, and then they took it upon themselves, and then they themselves eventually turned into stone or something.
Huh. I can see like it'd be a statue. Somebody with this cursed tattoo who has been stuck as a statue because there's some magic stone that gives off moonlight. And so it's a statue of them holding this stone, and it's just this centerpiece of a town square or something.
Okay.
And some maybe the party's rogue steals the moonstone, and then the person turns back into a person from from marble or whatever, or the stone goes missing or something, and then the statue goes missing, and you find a person who looks remarkably like the statue who is trying to get out of town or something.
Sure.
Yeah, no, this is pretty neat.
It is. It's really unique. I don't know if I've ever seen something quite like this. I've seen tattoos as magic items before, but none that are explicitly a curse, none that affect the people that see it. It's definitely a neat item. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything else for this one?
No. It's very creative. It's I could definitely see this as a cool plot hook.
Cool. Yeah. So thank you very much, Dustin. Once again, that was submitted by Dustin via Discord. Jeff, if anybody else wanted to submit magic items for us to discuss in the Dragon's Horde, or if they wanted to submit stories for the funeral pyre or retirement village, or if they wanted to submit questions for us to discuss in our main segment, how would they get those to us?
They could send us an email at interpartyconflict@gmail.com or join us on our Interparty Discord at bit.ly/interpartydiscord.
There you go. All right. So, Jeff, I want you to imagine that you decided to get a tattoo.
Okay.
You've been cooped up in your house for so long. somehow or another, you finally are able to go out and interact with other people, and you think, I've been cooped up for so long, I'm going a little stir crazy, let's do something outrageous. So next thing you know, you're sitting in a tattoo artist's chair. Mm-hmm. And the tattoo artist is a fairly large individual with scales. And every time they breathe, a little bit of ice comes out.
Okay.
And let's say you had some drinks beforehand. Now, I'm not trying to make any sort of any judgment about you as a person. It's a special occasion. Whatever the case, you ended up having a few drinks. So you don't even...
I was nervous about the pain and,
Sure. So you're actually not even sure which tattoo you told the tattoo artist to give you. You just kind of pointed at a book. And then it was a book or a scroll or something. You're not quite sure.
Right.
And so it actually hurts a little bit less than you expected. It's a little sore, but afterwards you go over to look at your newfound ink in the mirror. Mm-hmm. And you see what the tattoo is that you got. And it's a statement. Like some people will have their significant other's name or like the word mother or something.
Sure.
This one, it's covered up and you start to uncover it and it says, I heart. Oh my goodness, Jeff. You know what this says?
What?
I heart the dragon's horde.
Oh, no.
Welcome to InterPartyConflict, the podcast where we answer your questions so you can have the best tabletop gaming experience possible. My name is Gabe.
My name is Jeff.
And we're going to answer your questions today. But first, I have a question. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing okay. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm getting by, I suppose.
Yep.
We are. So while we're recording this, it is well into the quarantine that has been put in place for the pandemic that's going on right now. Mm-hmm. It's so weird to think, 6 months ago, would you have ever believed that we would actually be in the middle of something like this?
No, not at all. It's just one of those things you maybe think about after watching a movie that
Sure.
involves this sort of thing. You're like, man, what if that happened? And then it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's a little more terrifying and a lot less exciting.
Right.
For sure. But getting by, trying to keep myself busy. So
cool. So you are off work now currently?
Right now, yeah, this week I'm off. And then the governor of Michigan just put out some alert last night about, having businesses that are non-essential go, stay closed or whatever. And
Sure.
I'm not sure if my business is going to try to, classify themselves as essential. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea what's going to happen next week, but
yeah,
I'm going to try to stay home next week as well if I can stretch doing unemployment or something. But
sure.
But I'll worry about that later.
Yeah, it's definitely weird. I've been stuck at home all this time and looking for stuff to do. I've been trying to get a lot of podcast related stuff done, stuff I've been putting off for a long time. I just put out, the day we're recording this, I just put out what is probably the final episode of the Arcade Memories podcast.
Oh.
It's been 6 months or something since I planned to get an episode out 6 months ago, and it took me this long just to even get enough submissions for an episode. It's not even it's 3/4 of an episode. It's not even a full episode. So I put a disclaimer in there this is probably the last episode. If anybody wants to still submit anything for potential future episodes, go ahead and send them to me. If I get enough, I'll use them. If not, at the very least, I'll read or listen to them myself.
Right.
So
that's cool.
Yeah, that's something that I've been stressing out over it for 6 months because, like I said, I wanted to get it out 6 months ago, and every time I had free time, it just ended up slipping away from me. So, so I'm glad to have finally gotten it out there, and it's off my conscience.
Yep.
I've also been doing a lot of 3D printing.
Right.
So I'm currently I'm trying to print an entire dungeon. So I've got some dungeon tiles that are printing currently. So hopefully, hopefully in the next week or just in time for us to not be able to play in person.
Right. Sure.
Printing a bunch of terrain. So
yeah, I think you were telling me yesterday that hopefully by the time this is all over, you'll have a full dungeon ready to go.
That would be really cool if I could run you guys through a dungeon with monsters that I printed minis for, and, you know, maybe paint it. I don't know. We'll see how much actual time I have. I don't know when I'm going back to work, but
yeah, Gabe, painting minis, that takes several decades. I'll tell you, I have many minis that I haven't even touched yet.
Sure. But I don't know. It's been crazy. I'm glad that we can still make the podcast. You know, if for example there wasn't internet, we couldn't do this. So
right, of course.
I mean, I guess we couldn't record, and we could also not upload. That was a dumb statement. Anyway, I'm glad that we're still able to make the podcast. Hopefully, this helps make people's time easier, I guess.
Right. You know, just do our best to keep to our normal routine, and you know, if we're part of other people's normal routine, that helps them keep their normal routine and kind of help them, keep their sanity in these times.
Sure. It is, I will admit, it is a little weird recording remotely. I do prefer recording in person, but hey, it's not that much different. We'll do what we can.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The worst case scenario, it's like there's a little bit of a delay when you're editing, and we can't get the same feedback. Like if I want to interject in something, it's a little bit harder for me to do that.
Sure.
But it's it's totally doable.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a little bit extra work editing, but I mean, it's like having a guest every week, Having guests on is a bit more work too. So our first guest, Jeff.
Special guest, me.
Yeah. All right. You want to go ahead and jump into this episode?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Oh, and then before we go any further, April Fools.
Got him.